at one point you look around and you realize that you're actually part of something. You're not just sitting back passively enjoying this thing and or consuming a product. There's no product, there's no consumer. It's just an experience that everybody's having, and it's really cool.
Welcome to Overeducated and Underemployed. You got Feddun here. Thanks to those of you that came out to the Blue Tavern on Friday for the Danny Bedrosian solo show, playing a historic set of Parliament and Funkadelic songs. It was really cool. George Clinton showed up and sat in for pretty much the entire set. He showed up like in the third song and then stayed the entire show. It was really incredible. Led us in like a gospel sing-along. So come out to the Phipps Farm on April 11th for the Parliament Funkadelic Festival. Let's take it to the stage. I can't wait. I'll be there. Come say hey. We'll be broadcasting live during doing some interviews, maybe broadcasting a performance or two. I really hope you come out for that. And kids 12 and under get in free with their parents. That's April 11th at the Phipps Farm. There is a ticket link in the description of the episode. And it's really fitting to have Carrie Hamby on the show this week. She's the owner of the Blue Tavern, and she was there Friday, obviously, when Danny and George were playing together, and that was the look on her face was priceless. It was pretty cool because nobody knew that George was going to show up. I don't even think Danny knew for sure. I think it was like a maybe he will, maybe he won't thing. They're going to be playing a show together at Word of South, so I think that's probably a pretty good preview. I did videotape the whole thing, so we're going to be getting some exclusive clips on the YouTube channel. So if you are on a different platform, make sure you check out the YouTube channel. There is going to be some bonus stuff that's only available there. This week we have Carrie Hamby, who is the owner of the Blue Tavern, as I mentioned. She also plays in Belmont Jones, who play every last Tuesday at the Blue Tavern. March 31st is their next one. She's also part of the History of Punk, Legacy of Punk Festival this weekend. She's playing with a group on Sunday at the Bark. We had a great conversation about music and the struggle of owning a venue in these times, and yeah, it was great. I hope you enjoy it. And stay tuned afterwards. I'll tell you about some shows coming up at the Blue Tavern. Welcome to Overeducated and Underemployed. I'm here with Carrie Hamby. She is the owner of the Blue Tavern and a musician, and I want to get into all of it and probably a bunch of other stuff I don't even know about. I'm going to ask you the first question I ask everybody.
Okay.
And that's, what's the first song that you remember loving as a kid?
Oh, it was probably something on the Alpert the Tijuana Brass album that we played over and over again. When I
love
was a
those
kid.
records. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother and I would put on. We pretty much had full reign of the record player, and it was one of those pieces of furniture record players that was huge in the living room. We'd dance around and we'd listen to that. I forget what the song was. It was probably Acapulco or something like that. And we also listened to Jesus Christ Superstar a lot.
That musical. Yeah.
Other than that, it was probably the entire oeuvre of Disney animated classics. Somebody gave us the whole pile of records from Alice in Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those had really beautiful artwork on them too. Like they had all the full color print, and I can see those being like super enticing as a kid.
Yeah, and the production value, it really got me listening to songs in a big way.
Yeah. Were you? So it sounds like you were in a pretty musical household, but your parents weren't. Music was around at least, but your parents weren't like playing stuff for you? It sounds like you.
I think that sometimes they did. Sometimes they did. My mom was really, she still is very into classical music. So she had a whole library of classical albums, and she would put them on when it came time to clean the house. She had everybody helping her, all the kids would help. She'd put on an album and blast it, and it would be like Chopin or something, or the Brandenburg Concertos or something, and she'd be dancing around. It's good motivational music, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
My dad was always more into Broadway musicals, stuff
Okay.
like that. So we had all the Broadway musical collections, South Pacific over and over again, Music Man.
The Music Man is probably
Oh
my
my God.
it's definitely a top 5, but it might be my favorite musical like of all time.
Yeah.
Like, that's the original with Robert Preston is
Uh-huh.
just so good.
Yeah.
Were you interested in playing music at a young age, or were you just consuming this stuff at this point?
I was probably, I was probably breathing music from the as far back as I can remember. What I can remember, the first time I really wanted to start playing was I grew up in the church. There was a traveling choir with a pianist coming through, and they did a special performance for us. It was probably after the church service, probably after the church dinner. And this guy sat down and played, and he was this big, huge guy. And he sat down we had a baby grand piano in the sanctuary, and he sat down and just started wailing on that piano. And it was like, later on, I would hear things like Rhapsody in Blue or something like that. I'd think, that's the kind of piano he was playing. He was playing that kind of.
So
You need to stop.
no, we're good. I'm just checking on things. I'm listening to you.
All right.
So did you start playing piano pretty young?
I listened to that. I was probably 4 years old, and I said, that's what I want to do. And we didn't have a piano then, but my parents found somebody in the church that wanted to get rid of their piano, and ended up in our house. And it ended up in my house until probably 20 years ago. And I've just played it constantly.
Did you take lessons or?
Yeah, I took lessons. I didn't really get into the lessons until I was more like 5. But then
That makes sense, to be fair.
yeah, when I was 4, I wasn't really ready. But my teacher said, "Hey, if you really want to do this, you can do this, but you got to work at it. You got to sit down and practice." And
That's one thing
I'm not
we've
playing.
talked about on this podcast before is how just having the talent to do something isn't even everything. You have to really want to put the time in and the effort in, and that takes a desire to want to really be good at it. And there's all these other things that go and also if you don't have that innate talent, most of the time you can develop it somewhere. But it sounds like you had a very kind of early affiliation, and you were in tune with it all.
Yeah, I had a really good ear. I had a good ear. I didn't have the willingness to sit down and look at the page and figure out what things are until a couple years later. But once I got that, then the math brain kicks in. So I'm all into the music theory, and I got it, and it was so fun. It was like a little puzzle that you can figure out.
Yeah.
You go, oh, everything makes sense, even though nothing makes sense. You can say, oh, this little part of the world makes sense.
And then someone shows you an Eastern scale, and you're like, what?
Yeah. So, yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I played pretty much constantly for the next 10, 12 years.
Did you start playing with other people, or you were just playing by yourself?
No, that's the thing about the piano. Unless people are coming to your house, which they weren't.
Right.
I didn't know anybody who played, who wanted to come over to the house and play when I was 10.
Where did you grow up?
When I started taking lessons was when I was living in southern Indiana.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you moved where as a kid?
I moved when I was 10. I moved to Ohio for about 4 years. And it took me a little bit to find the right teacher, but I ended up finding this great teacher there, and she was probably 70, 80 years old, but introduced me to ragtime. And that just changed my whole perspective. She was still very much tied to the page. I was tied to the page until I left home, and I didn't have lessons anymore. I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do musically. And I
But
didn't
you
do
had a
anything for while.
piano. Like, how long did you go without a piano when you left home?
Oh man, I went without a piano all 4 years of college. I didn't really have a place to practice, and I didn't have a piano anywhere nearby. And then the first probably 3 years of living up here. So yeah, probably 7 years, maybe even 8 years, I didn't have a piano.
And so you moved to Tallahassee, and what kind of prompted that move?
I graduated from New College, and I was engaged to be married at that time. And my fiance and I, who was later my husband, we said, let's both try to get a job in Tallahassee, because we both really liked Tallahassee and wanted to. He was more into it than I was, but we both had this idea of working in state government. And I thought I could find something there. And it very quickly became clear to me that I did not fit in there.
At state government?
No.
Yeah.
And I later got a state job, but it wasn't in the legislature. But they had an internship program, and you had to go through all these hurdles, all these hoops to get in. So I gave up on that after we moved up here, and our agreement was, if one of us gets the job, gets the internship, we'll move up there. Mm-hmm. If both of us do, of course. But if whoever doesn't get it, we'll just work and find something to do until we can figure out what we're doing. We were just kind of like free-forming. He got a job, and he's still there. And so I worked in a lot of different jobs after that. And that was fine. I didn't really have a career after that.
What were some of like the ones you enjoyed and the ones you didn't? I always like asking about
the ones I enjoyed and the ones I didn't. I was one of the first people to work on Macintosh computers in the printing business in Tallahassee. Okay. That's how far back that goes. And this was in the mid-'80s, late 80s. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed doing the desktop publishing, and I was in Paste Up before that. I was working at the Flambeau.
Okay.
Did learn how to do darkroom stuff and all the Paste Up, and I learned how to use a Linotype and picture what's there. It wasn't WYSIWYG. It was like you had to figure out what your leading was going to be, how much space you needed for the next line, all that stuff, and it had to be right when it printed out. Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't, you had to do it all over again. It was a pain in the ass.
For you kids out there, a WYSIWYG is it's what you get. So it's the kind of design that a lot of people get to use now.
We just take it for granted now.
Right, exactly. But back then, we had a whole name for it.
Typesetting was a whole field of expertise that I just slid into by accident, and did that for a few years.
So
I'm trying to think of what I did after that.
Were you playing music at all this time?
I wasn't. I found some people to play music with off and on, and it was to varying levels of satisfaction.
When did you start playing with others? Because you mentioned earlier you weren't really playing with other people.
When I was playing piano, I tell you, when I started playing with other people was when I picked up the guitar. I had a shout out to my friend Linda Mutner. She still lives in St. Pete, and she lived down the street from me and taught me my first chords on the guitar. And I like to tell everybody, especially in front of her, that she taught me how to play my first chords on the guitar, and she also taught me how to smoke cigarettes. Thank you. And that was a revelation, though, because I got to play with other people. That was like never a thing. I take that back. I did play with other people because I was the accompanist. So I was in the background while somebody else was singing, or I was providing a background for somebody to play a flute solo or something like that. But playing with other people and
in a creative way.
In a creative way where it's not everything is not already on the page. Yeah.
And then that's really what I meant too.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, were you writing songs on the piano, or were you?
Not really.
Was the guitar kind of your way into writing songs, or is that
Mm,
not something that you do a lot of?
I didn't. I write a lot now, but I didn't
Hmm.
write for a long time. I got into bluegrass and old time music
Okay.
through. Once I started playing guitar, I also had a friend who taught me how to play mandolin, and there were a bunch of people meeting every week or so to play bluegrass and old time music. And so I got into that, and I developed my ear more that way because there was nothing written down. We were just following the chord changes.
Gotcha.
And I knew what the chord changes looked like by that point because I had learned how to play the chords. And so when you're playing the mandolin or the fiddle or the banjo or something like that, you look at the guitar player's left hand to see what the chord changes are. And then a few years later, I figured out the some people call it the Nashville method, where you understand what the 1, 4, 5 and the relative minor are, and you can pretty much figure out most things from that.
You start playing guitar.
Mhm.
You start playing with other people.
Yep.
What were you listening to that wasn't like? Because we talked about what you were listening to like early on, but what was some of the popular stuff, or were you into popular music at that point?
I was
Or
into all kinds of music.
yeah, yeah. What did you grow up listening to?
Let's see. Besides the stuff that we talked about that my
Mhm.
parents were listening to, I had an older brother who would bring home stuff like Queen records, and I'd listen to those. ELO, those two really stand out. Maybe Yes. There was a kid in the neighborhood who was really into the Beatles, and he would get all the other kids over to his room to listen to the latest thing that he'd gotten from the Beatles, even though the Beatles, this was like 1978
Right,
by
right,
now.
right. Yeah, they've
And
been
so,
broken up for a
yeah,
decade
so
almost.
they were
Yeah.
gone. But this was like, but that was his theme was the Beatles. So what I was listening to on my own, after that, probably, I listened to a lot of AM radio.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I got a little transistor that I could put in under my pillow so nobody could hear that I was listening to the radio instead of sleeping. And I would listen to, God, I can't even remember. Let's see. Now that I've said that, I'm thinking CBS Radio Mystery Theater. I was listening to that a lot.
Do you think that sort of thing influenced your songwriting later on? Like that
Everything's an influence.
well,
Everything.
so
Yeah.
talk about that. Do
Um,
you, when you're writing, do you consciously try to bring in influences, or is it just like what comes out of you?
No, I really don't do that. And it's going to come out. It's going to come out whether you want it to or not, right? And
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
feel like making it, making something harken back to another thing that doesn't do much for me. I have done it as an exercise just to see if I can write a ragtime of something.
Yeah.
And when I was in my teens, especially like when I left home, I started listening to all kinds of stuff. I was listening to Prince. I love Joe Jackson.
I love Joe Jackson, especially that record of like Louis Jordan covers he did, Jump and Jive. Do you remember that record?
Yeah, it was the first one I ever listened to.
That me too of
Yeah.
his. Yeah, I love that
Mhm.
record. Still have it. I got it over there.
Mhm.
That and that I was already into big band and stuff like that a little bit, but I think hearing like a more modern take on it was just
Yeah.
otherworldly to me.
And he took everything a step further. It felt to me like he was taking everything a step further, like he was really just completely eaten up with it. Not just, it wasn't just a show, it was an experience. And what was the other thing I was thinking about
sorry.
back then? I was like, Sun Ra. I
Oh,
was listening
yeah.
to Sun Ra. And I was also listening to John Fahey.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, who was just an absolute monster on the guitar.
Were you going to concerts at all as a kid or as a teenager?
No, I wasn't going to much. The first live music concert I went to that was like on my own with a friend from high school was Fog Hat
Oh, nice.
at the Lakeland. What was it called? The big arena there in Lakeland. Anyway.
Good
Yeah.
old Fall Cat.
Oh,
Slow ride,
no,
right?
Fog Hat. Oh, Fog Hat was opening for Blue Oyster Cult. That was it. Blue Oyster Cult. Yeah.
Nice.
And they were already pretty well seasoned by then.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they were just going through the motions, but it was phenomenal though, because just had never been to anything that big.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Other than that, yeah,
So-
I didn't get out much. I didn't have a car.
When did you really fall in love with live music, or was it always about the playing with other people? Because if you weren't going to a lot of live shows as a kid, but now you own a live music venue, right? So
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out at what point did you feel like, oh, I love live music so much that I want to do that with
Oh, okay.
everything.
Okay. As with most things in my career of sort, it's not really a career, but in my work history, everything was accidental. So I started playing blues with Belmont, and we did that we've been playing together for about 15, 16 years now. And at some
And y'all play
point-
as Belmont and Jones.
Belmont Jones.
I just want to,
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
listener.
yeah.
you know,
Belmont Jones, I'm Jones. I'm so glad you're doing this at 1:00. I had the last time I did anything like this. I don't even think it was a podcast. I think it was a live radio show, and it was at 9 a.m.
no.
Oh my God!
It's like just late enough to be awake, but not late enough to be worn out. It's
Yeah.
Early
It's
afternoon is the best time for
The
these.
happy medium.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened was Maggie McEwen, Belmont's partner, decides that she wants to open up a venue, and she starts looking at places in town. And Josh's place, which was the Speakeasy, he was just getting ready to sell at the very moment. It was almost like the planets lined up. And
that place was, I feel like it was a really cool spot, but I feel like they
was.
never quite found their footing or figured out
they didn't have time.
their crowd
Yeah.
or anything like that. It was just
Yeah.
it popped up for like a year, maybe 2.
2 years, yeah.
And
Yeah, they could have, if they'd been able to keep going, it would have been really nice. Because it definitely filled a niche. So it was like the Leon Pub, only more about the music. Because
right.
they did have live music.
Yeah. The seating arrangement made it hard to see like, because of
Yeah.
the booths and things like that. I'm remembering.
Yeah, the booths.
You did a lot of remodeling when you took over that space.
Maggie took over in 2016.
Okay.
And the way it went was I had just taken a job with the state as a part-time person over at Mission San Luis. And because I needed to get off the road and stop like constantly booking and constantly worrying about where we were going to play. And that was really wearing me down. So
I used to blacksmith with one of the guys that worked over there.
Jim.
Yeah. That doesn't sound right. Now,
There
like
was
the
a
name
bunch
is on,
of them.
There are.
Yeah.
I think the thing is like there's also like a group of them that meet, and so I think I've met Jim.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah. There's
John, I think, is
dedicated
who I was working with.
blacksmiths.
And Mission San Luis is a really cool spot. Do you want to talk about that spot for a minute?
It's a very
since
cool
you
spot.
worked there?
Yeah, I
don't think we've ever really talked about it on this podcast before.
Oh, okay. It's an open air museum, and at the time I was working there, they had a full staff of reenactors, living history interpreters, if you want to call it. And I had a great job. I got to do all the cooking outside, right next to the Spanish lady's house, the quote Spanish lady's house.
And for those of y'all that don't know, this Mission San Luis it was a Spanish settlement.
Yeah.
And now it was an archaeological site, and now they've rebuilt that settlement.
Yeah.
With the original like methodologies of building in a lot of cases, and it's a really fascinating like archaeological site as well as museum. And they did this living history thing for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to give people a little bit of back. We've got listeners that have never been there
that are
at
not
all.
from here.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
it. And
So
even if you are from here, if you haven't been out there, you need to get out there
it's
because
really, really amazing.
it's wild, and it was the center of government for the Indian town, for the Appalachie town that was here before the Creeks moved in. So it goes way, way back.
It was
And
Dodo's settlement, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't he involved with that settlement at one point? Or
I don't no, I don't think so.
no?
For some
Okay.
reason, I'm thinking. Anyway,
Yeah.
it is on the
I'm a historian of science, so I don't know either.
what do they call it? It's on the King's Road.
Hmm.
Goes right through it, and you can see if you're on the grounds of the Mission San Luis, you can go to a certain place in the middle, like the buildings are situated in a circle, and you can go in the middle of that circle and look due west, and you can see the remnants of the road, and that is a really cool experience.
That's wild.
Yeah. There's nothing left except just a dip. It's kind of okay. This is where it's kind of like looking at an old rail bed.
And you were one of the reenactors. You were doing some of the
Yeah, so I was doing that.
Can you give an example of like how you would cook there that is different than like how you would cook now? As in terms of doing the reenacting?
Oh yeah, I was using all cast iron or either cast iron or wrought iron cookware, and I was on a spider over an open flame. A spider is like a grate, a very rudimentary grate, and you can. They had a pole stretched out over the fire pit where you could hang. They have an S hook that you would hang a big, like a Dutch oven type of thing with a handle, and I would do all the cooking right there over the flame, which was great.
But you were also doing some work at the Blue Tavern at that,
No, this is pre-Blue Tavern. So
But you had just started there
I
when
just
Maggie
started there
started the Blue Tavern. Okay.
Yeah, I'd been there for maybe less than 6 months. And then, but I had told Maggie, if you ever want to open up a venue, because I'd heard that she wanted to, I said, we need more venues in this town. It was during that time when we hardly had anything.
Yeah.
As far as live music venues. And
I just had Justin Long on a couple of weeks, or at this point, when this comes out, it will have been a couple of months ago. But we talked about in the early 2000s, and I'm not sure if you were in Tallahassee yet at that point, but in the early 2000s, there was so much live original music, full bands.
I know.
5 bands got signed out of Tallahassee in the same year.
Yeah.
And
it's cyclical.
And it like really did, by 2016, there really was nothing, like at all, like less than there is now.
Yeah, there were a lot of forces against it. But anyway, I told Maggie, if you ever want to open up a venue, I will drop whatever I'm doing. And those were fateful words, I tell you. I was like, okay, this happened. And she said, you want to partner with me? Or we weren't really partners. I was basically working for her. But she said, you want to be my music person? And I said, yes.
You dropped the cast iron skillet on the ground right
in the fire. And so she bought the place in July, and we were open by October. And there was a lot of work in between.
And let's talk about what are some of the things that you weren't expecting that would need to be done when opening a music venue?
Rebuilding the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When you have a venue, you're responsible for the people that are in there, and they're having a good time, they're having a safe time. You're responsible for what happens there. And it's her being the owner, she was legally responsible, but I felt a very deep sense of responsibility for people having a good time and having the kind of experience where they would want to come back. Because when we started out, it wasn't like a college kid hangout. It wasn't a hangout for any particular group of people. She had just moved back to town. She knew some people, but she didn't know a lot of people that were going out. And it was at that period of time when acoustic musicians were not touring, and they were doing house concerts instead of playing in bars
Hmm.
because you take your chances when you're playing at a bar.
Yeah,
As you
well,
experienced with Taylor Hollingsworth. Yeah, people are going to talk.
Yeah,
They're going to talk while you're playing sometimes.
and I came to
Yeah.
find out, we talked the next day after that show, or no, we talked right before that show, but I saw him the next day in Jacksonville. Those people were his friends that came from out of town. Like a lot of the people talking were like his friends that came from out of town to see him play.
Yeah.
And then they sat there and
I've
talked.
had that happen with me. I've had my friends show up to see a show that I was playing in, and they'll be like jabbering the whole time. And it's just, okay. Frank Lindemood. You ever had Frank Lindemood on this show?
No.
You should get him.
Okay, yeah, no, I've
He's
been in
great.
the works to talk to him. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll tell you. He could tell you so many stories, but he said something that was.
He doesn't
really,
have much of a filter either, which I've always enjoyed.
Gil, if he's allowed to bring his flask.
I don't have any rules here except.
No. Oh, good. Let me get out my syringe here.
That's what you want to do on camera.
No, he said something that
YouTube
really
might demonetize the video if someone starts shooting up. Anyway,
our sponsor today
Narcan.
is Narcan, TMH Appalachia. He said, "I don't really care if there's people talking while I'm playing. It means they're having a good time." Now, there's a line between people talking while you're playing and people yelling so much that you can't hear yourself.
Yeah.
And I've played in plenty of places like that. That's why we have monitors.
I think there's a difference between a bar band and like a concert.
Yeah.
And I think that you have always had to really kind of walk that line because
And the line is constantly shifting.
yeah,
They're really
yeah.
It's very fuzzy. And to me, a concert, the word concert is misleading a lot of times. I feel that in our culture, seeing music, I'm using my air quotes here, seeing music, hearing music, going to a concert, experiencing a concert is unnecessarily putting you at a distance from the music, from the creative process that's going on stage. The stage, in the Blue Tavern, there's not much of a line between the stage and the rest of the room because of necessity, because it's such a tiny room and there's no change in altitude there. But I think the best musical experiences I've ever had that could be classified as concerts were ones in which the audience was participating. And I'm not talking about necessarily, okay, we're going to have a sing-along here. Everybody sing along. It's more like you just, at one point, you look around and you realize that you're actually part of something. You're not just sitting back passively enjoying this thing and consuming a product.
Yeah.
There's no product, there's no consumer. It's just an experience that everybody's having, and it's really cool. And the thing that I want to happen the most is something like that. If that can happen, then it's a good night. And most nights are like that.
Yeah.
Most nights are like that. There are times when it feels very stilted, like the person isn't really quite comfortable enough with the scene, with playing in such a small room or playing that close to somebody sitting practically in your lap while you're playing. But you have to get over it.
Yeah, yeah. I think what you're talking about is exactly what I love about stand-up comedy because it requires. One thing we've talked about on this show is like a band can have a good show with or without the audience's participant. Like they feel good among each other. That was a great show. I had so much fun playing. A stand-up, even a solo artist can have a good show without the audience like confirming it or reaffirming it or whatever, or feel like they did, right? They can have that feeling of satisfaction. A stand-up comedian cannot. It requires the audience to engage. It requires that give and that take, that audience energy, like reciprocal energy between the audience and the comedian is like it has to happen, or you're literally just
dying.
It's like the worst experience for everybody in the room, right? Like the audience is miserable, the comedian's if everybody's just sitting there.
Oh yeah.
Even if they're like booing or heckling you, that's better than silence. No?
Oh.
But what you're talking about, and it's why I love club shows and smaller venues. I don't like going to arena shows. There's a couple of bands I'll go see. Like I'll go see Weird Al in an arena because that's first of all, the show fits it. It's like an extravaganza, right? But it's also that's the only place you're gonna see Weird Al. But like most of the time, I'd rather just like, watch a live concert film on my really good sound system with lights. And if it's like an arena,
all the different angles.
Yeah, if it's an arena show, because half the time you're just watching the screen anyway. And I'm not saying I wouldn't go to those shows. They're just not that important to me. And the experience, if I have a handful of friends over at my house and watch it like an event, it's not much different than going and watching the giant screen from the nosebleeds, because that's all I'm going to afford anyway.
but what you're talking about there is a spectacle. And it's
sure.
The last big show I went to that I can recall was at the Civic Center. And this was probably in the late 80s, early 90s. Lyle Lovett, trio, back before he had his large band, he was traveling. He opened for Reba McEntire.
Oh, hell yeah.
And she came out, I mean, she had like a different costume every 2 or 3 songs. And she put on a show, brother. Wow. Wow.
And you can tell like some artists get so big so fast that they don't grow into those venues.
Yeah.
So they just go up there and they play like the club show in front of 20,000 people. And there's this weird disconnect. But the real concert, like I guess what I'm saying though is being in those arenas is not much different to me than just like watching a really good live film. Yeah. Whereas like going to a club show and where the energy, like, my favorite band is the Drive-By Truckers. I've seen them like countless times over the last 21 years. And their shows are completely, everybody sings every word along to every song. They're feeding off the energy of the crowd. Rarely do they play places with a barricade. And if they're allowed to get the barricade removed, they do. They just don't. I'll be seeing them at the 40-watt. Play 4 nights next week up in Athens. There's no barricade. You're just on the stage if you're up front. They're like, don't put your beer on the stage kind of thing. I guess my point is what you're talking about is exactly what I love about live music. Mm-hmm. It's not, once it gets to be a certain size and you have that distance that you were talking about between the artist and the crowd, you might as well just be watching something happen.
Yeah.
And the only way to make it organic is like to invite some friends with you, or like invite some friends over and watch the thing on whatever. But I just don't see those two things as much different. Whereas like going to a club or going to see a show at an intimate venue like the Blue Tavern is a very different experience that is an exchange of energy, requires the audience to want to be there too, I think.
Oh yeah. If you don't want to be there have been, I mean, granted, there are times when people do talk so loudly and they're obviously not there for the music, and I'll invite them to go out to the courtyard and continue their conversation outside.
Yeah.
But
especially if it's like nice out.
If it's rainy, I'm like, get out of here. Go to the Leon pub. But one of my favorite things is when people come in and they just think they're just gonna have a beer, or they're gonna check the place out because it looks like a dive and they're curious, and then they end up staying for the rest of the night, going, "Oh my God, I had no idea," and they're just like, and they've converted to fandom for whoever was playing that night, and
you might be unlocking like either a new love or a newfound love of live music again too, because I think
that's what I'd like.
So many, especially after the pandemic, so many people just got out of the habit of living, like going out and doing stuff.
Yeah, doing things
I mean,
together.
myself included.
Yeah.
That I
was,
think
that was
having a
already.
night like what you're talking about can reignite. Oh, this is what life used to be
This
like.
is what it used to be like back before, and it's not. I can't blame everything on the pandemic.
No.
There was a famous book called Bowling Alone, and it's about people losing connection with each other, not doing things together.
I
not,
used to
not
go
going
bowling
to
alone.
not going to clubs or bowling in front of the TV using Wii or whatever it is. Just the loss of community that came with the breakdown of social networks. And sometimes for some people that's the church, sometimes it's like the Elks Club or the bowling league or
I mean, you're
whatever.
talking about third spaces.
Third spaces, yeah.
And I think we have so few of them, and the Blue Tavern has succeeded in being like this really great safe haven. And not only that, but I think the elephant in the room that we haven't really addressed is like it opens in October of 2016.
Right before the election.
And the country has gotten like more and more and more divided. And not only that, but people have felt like less and less safe around people that advocate for certain policies and things like that. What are some of the things that you've done to keep the Blue Tavern, I don't want to say just like a hate-free space? That's, I think, as far as I'm like comfortable speaking for you. if you want to talk about more about like what you've put behind.
I during the shutdown, I embroidered a little needlepoint thing that says "Be nice or fuck off," and I put it on the wall, and that pretty much says it all for me. If you are making somebody uncomfortable, if they have asked you to stop and you won't, you're out of here.
Yeah.
If you can't deal with the fact that there's different kinds of people in here from what you look like, then you don't need to be in here.
What about people wearing overtly political or like hateful?
We have one guy who comes in, he always has this big Trump sticker on his instrument case. And the way that his fellow musicians have dealt with that is that they get more and bigger pride flags to stick on their cases. So it's like, okay, you can wear your Trump sticker, I can wear my pride flag.
Yeah.
I got a freak flag right there in the window. I'm
a walking freak flag.
My version of the freak flag is the state of Florida with I don't know who made this, but I saw it online and I was like, I have to buy this. And it's the pride flag with the state of Florida seal in front of it. And we're 3 blocks from the governor's mansion, something like that. Yeah, Isabel Ruano, one of our bartenders, she brought in a flag and stuck it up on the wall, and it's hate has no place here, love is love, science is real. I can't remember what it is. It's one of those things that just kind of it's like a mini manifesto of what we believe in because we're reasonable, nice people. And I've seen every once in a while I'll see somebody looking up at it going like they're having to think about that.
Like whether or not they want to participate in that social contract.
But the thing is, they don't feel unsafe there. They don't feel like they're going to be beset by hordes of angry lesbians or something. It's just, that's what we believe here. And if you don't like it, you can leave.
I think some people pay for that, by the way.
Some people pay for that? Oh, yeah. Paid agitators. Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you have had? You talked about like the line shifting for like crowds and their like volume level over the years. What are some of the other things that have changed for you over the 9 years, almost 10 years now that the Blue Tavern has been open? What are some of the things that are very different now than they were when you started?
Jeez. We have a full kitchen now. Yeah, we used to have to cook behind the bar.
I remember that.
Yeah, and when we closed, when the bartender closed, after you were done doing the dishes, then you had to clean the dishes. The glassware, then you had to clean all and gumbo, man. That's some residue there, man. So things that are wildly different now.
Well, I'm more thinking about things that you've had to adjust to in the world over the years too. I'm sure there have been times where you've had.
I don't adjust. I don't adjust. The world adjusts to me. Yeah.
And I think that's part of why you've been successful. To be fair, I think like being this like consistent, hold steady throughout the last decade has been true. Like truly part of your success. But
we haven't really changed very much. I know that we have the same sound system as we had when we opened. The one thing that I did change, and it's not always, but like when Maggie owned it, she said, absolutely no, ever, never any canned music and no TVs. And I will never, ever have a TV in there.
Yeah.
We hooked up a TV during the last election, courtesy of Kim McShane. She brought in a TV and hooked it up to her computer, and we watched the results come in.
And then she got the hell out of there.
Yeah, I was like, I want to get the hell out of here too. Yeah, but so I'll have canned music. I have an Apple Tunes subscription. Mm-hmm. I won't lie, it's great because there's not any ads. I don't have to listen to crap that I don't want to listen to. And I can make my own playlist for whatever.
And you can listen to this podcast.
I can listen to this podcast. And Hal Padgett makes a birthday playlist every month for the last Thursday of the month. We have a happy birthday party for anybody who had a birthday that month.
And you usually have somebody who was born that month play as well, right?
Yes. Greg Brown played this past month. And I was sick, or else I would have played the playlist that Hal Padgett made for me, which was like wall-to-wall Lucinda Williams. I'd say one of the main things one of the most recent things that has happened in the bar that I've been wanting to happen for a long time, and the planets lined up again. Jelani Marks of the Tallahassee Vinyl Club brought the club over, and they had a record party.
I saw that. I really wanted to be there.
Packed. And Maggie lives right down the street. She lives like a block and a half from the bar. And she walked up to see what was going on. We've been like taking turns checking on the water because of the freeze. And so she came up to check the faucets, and she walked in, and there was this she said, I didn't recognize the place. It was great.
And that's happening
on a
every
happy
month
hour.
now, right?
And no, it's going to happen until I can figure out something more regular. The fifth Saturday. Whenever there's a fifth Saturday. Yeah, they own that Saturday.
Cool.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you're dealing with in the last couple of years that what are some, like, if somebody's out there trying to start their own live music space, what are some of the things that you
do it?
Yeah, there's that. But if you can't talk them out of it, that's the thing is, I think if you can do something else, then you probably should. But if you can't, then what would you advise to them?
And this is funny because and this is like my own little personal story, but when I went to work for San Luis, I had decided I was going to stay home and get a regular job for a while. Mm. And at almost 50 years old, that's a hard thing to do if you've been out of the job market for a while. And I have all these different skills, and I could not put them to use anywhere. The market was just not there. And so when I found that, then instantly, that's how it happened. The tavern opportunity opened up. But I would say if you wanted to do this, one thing that I did, I'm really glad that I did. I called the people who I knew that had done something anything remotely like this, and I got advice. Get advice from somebody who's been there. It's not always going to apply because they might have started their business back when you could do things that you can't do now, or they might have started the business when you couldn't do things that you can do now. Yeah. Get some real world talk from people who've been there. And another thing that I think has really helped me is keeping in contact and keeping connections with the people that I know in the music community. I know I've always known a lot of musicians, but since doing this, I feel like I know more musicians and I know them better. And
And I think
so
it's also important.
communicating with them and giving them the respect
Yeah.
that they require, not talking to them like they're just a commodity. You're going to provide something and I'm going to give you this. And it's more of you really have to establish trust. And
That was what I was going to say is like, it's like more than just knowing them. Like you have to, I think one thing that's really important is you've always kept people around you that you can trust.
yeah. And I've tried to be trustworthy. I try to let people know that I'm not going to bullshit them. I'm not going to promise you something that I can't deliver.
Right.
And and I realize as a musician, you can go someplace else and make way more money, but you're not going to get treated better. You might get treated as well, but I like the fact that we have our own sound system. I know how to run it. Several other people know how to run it that I trust. And as a musician coming into a place, having to schlep all that equipment and set it up yourself, that gets real old.
And there are a lot of places in town that expect you to do that. It's really absurd to me. I'm like,
yeah, just invest in a
like
sound system.
Like I have my own sound system just for house shows and trivia. Like it's like it's not even that big of an investment to get something for the kinds of shows that a lot of these places are having anyway.
Yeah.
I do think the upside, and I was actually talking to Taylor Hollingsworth about this, of somebody like him he has a little touring rig that he can just set up anywhere. He always knows how to make it sound the way he wants it to sound. And so I think that's the upside for musicians, and that's how venues like can justify it to them. But I think it's bullshit. I think like most of the time a musician knows how to make their stuff sound the way they want it to sound anywhere in any system, and having a sound system with a sound, like somebody who knows it, a sound person, is like so much better than like having that. Because here's a story about the Dolce Trio, and I won't name the venue, but I went up to a venue with them where they had to bring their own sound system, and they're like trying to do their own sound check. Like they can't be in two places. They can't be on the stage and in the audience at the same time. So like in order for them to have a full sound check where everybody was playing at the same time, like they needed somebody else to just hear it.
Yeah.
Just little things like that, I think, are so important.
And it's not always possible to have somebody free to do that. Hopefully you have a friend who will be there and help you with that.
You mean as a band? Yeah.
As a band. Yeah. As a musician, I think it's good to have an ally.
And I think some people will think about all of the things that a creative person who is successful might do that is like a little bit different than the average person. Like they might have a personal chef, or they might have some super odd things on their tour rider.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like green M&Ms, because that was like a test for making sure they read it for pyrotechnics, but because it was like a safety thing. But I am talking about a particular kind of food, or just being particular about something like that.
Yeah.
As a creative person, the more of those things that you don't have to worry about that day allows so much more energy to go into the performance or the writing or the recording or whatever. So having, I think, somebody that's there to take care of the artist and like really make sure that they are like they have everything they need and that they're in a good spot. They're fed. Like I know you always feed your artists.
Well, we
you
don't
can.
always. I try to.
I was more thinking about touring musicians, but
yeah, I agree. I think there should be a concierge role for people who,
because they don't need to have to worry about
to make sure that they're comfortable.
They've been traveling all day, and I think the particulars of food and stuff, it's hard to eat on the road and eat well on the road. So I just think like what you do makes for a better show too, because it allows treating an artist well allows them to like not have to worry about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And especially the second time, because the first time they don't know. But the second time they're like, oh no, Carrie's got me. Everything's going to be fine. I can just focus on putting on a good show.
Yeah. And that frees your energy up in a big way, what you're saying. Yeah. And I believe that my experience as a musician, as a touring musician, really helped me figure out how people want to be treated. Because if I hadn't had that experience, I don't know, I might be clueless about that, or I might be just learning it.
Now I feel like we skipped over some stuff. Let's talk about when you were a touring musician.
Do we have to?
No, we don't. We don't have to talk about anything you don't want to talk about. But I do
Let
feel
me tell
like
you about the other day when when my eye blew up.
Oh yeah,
So,
go for it.
you ever see Election with Matthew Broderick?
Yeah, I did.
Remember
actually.
when he gets stung by a bee or a wasp on his eye? That's what my eye looked like.
Oh my goodness.
It was horrible. Okay, now I just need
But
to
you're
get that out of my
okay.
system. I'm fine now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just still aware of it because my eye feels weird.
Also,
Yeah.
what a great callback. That movie rules. That
I love
movie
that.
is awesome.
I love that movie. I just saw it a second time, like within the last 5 years, and it's still just.
It's so funny. It's so funny. Oh my! I feel like it's one of those movies that's like gotten better too. It's like more apropos. It like makes more sense. It's funnier than it ever was. Like
It hits hard.
yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
So you toured as a musician. You toured. You were a touring musician.
I did some traveling. I've
Yeah.
done some traveling.
Was that with Belmont Jones?
Yeah, I did some solo. I did some with the band the Mayhaws.
Okay.
Yeah.
When was that band?
Oh, let's see. We formed up in 06 or yeah.
I remember the
06.
name, but I don't think I
Yeah.
can't. I'm trying to picture it.
You remember Charlotte June?
Huh?
Beggs and Aiken? So she started writing. She went to Europe. She came back, started writing a bunch of stuff, and put together this little band called the Mayhaws. And I was her bass player. And we found some harmony singing together.
Oh,
and we had a
cool.
blast doing that. We had Deb Erlinger on the drums, Dave Leparati on mandolin, and we did some of his songs too. We had some 4-part harmonies sometimes. Adam Straubinger played with us on fiddle. Yeah, we had a really tight little band. We played at Birds a bunch.
Originals, or did you play?
We played mostly originals. We played. I don't know. I'd say maybe 2/3 originals. We did some really like old rockabilly stuff. We played some Iggy Pop.
Nice.
We played Patsy Cline. Yeah, we were all over the map. But yeah, we went up all the way up to Vermont a couple times. We did a tour. I think we did 3 tours.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you were doing that?
Oh, we had a diesel step van, which is now owned by Rick Ott.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he bought it from me. I bought it from Anna Alvarez, who just sold the Healing Center. It was a challenge to drive. That was our band bus and driving hairpin turns up in the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah, that sounds scary.
It was scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We had some challenges, just like every band, just spending a lot of time together and getting tired of each other.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then deciding, hey, this is really fun. What else are we going to do with our lives?
Well, that's one aspect I think that I've heard the drive-by truckers talk about. Patterson Hood has talked about this before, where it's like you gotta like the people that you're on the road with. You gotta want to be around them 24/7 for a while. if
Even
you're
when
gonna
they
go on
irritate
tour.
the shit out of you.
Yeah.
You have to love them.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about, both I feel like maybe your perspective might be different depending on which hat you're wearing. Maybe not, but what do you think about the abundance of covers in music today? Because I think cover songs are fine in general. I think playing like and I'm just gonna be like open about my opinions on this. I think like playing an all cover set is kind of lame. I think playing covers that you are gonna hear at karaoke is lame. I think that covers can be done really well if it's like introducing you to maybe a song you haven't heard by an artist that you might already know, or when you're doing like a really different cover of a song, so you're like making it your own. I really get tired of like bands just all playing the same 40 songs that are on karaoke though. I don't experience that at your venue. I've experienced it more at the bar when a band has to fill 4 hours kind of thing.
What are
But
you going to do for 4 hours? Yeah, some people have enough original.
they can pick more. They can also just pick better covers.
They can pick better covers. You're talking to somebody who does a lot of covers in the form of old time music, and those are all old. Those are all covers, unless you're playing an old time style piece that was written by somebody like Bronwyn Gillette.
Yeah,
there are people. I've done a couple. I've written a couple of pieces that have been played at contra dance bands. It's really a matter of expectations.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I think when you're playing, I'm also a blues musician, so I play a lot of Rainey covers and Memphis Minnie covers. And those are covers. I try to make them my own. I'm not trying to be Ma Rainey, because I will never ever be Ma Rainey. That would be stupid. But what I do try to do is respect the material and respect the artist, and especially, let me just say, respect the fact that a musician of color created something, and I'm using that thing that they created. And when that happens, I try to make sure everybody knows I did not write this. I didn't come up with this, and I need you to know who did.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing. I think if somebody plays a cover and it's instantly recognizable to everybody as a cover, great. If somebody's doing a cover of somebody else's song and they're passing it off as their own material, they need to be straight about that.
Yeah, sure. I think
that's lame.
One thing that it's super. I was going to use a way stronger word than that, but I just moved on. Okay. But yeah, it's super, super lame. I think one thing that you brought to my attention that maybe unintentionally is that you're talking about a lot of, when you're talking about bluegrass and blues, you're talking about a lot of music that at a certain point just starts being considered like traditional.
Yeah.
They're traditional tunes.
Yeah.
And it made me realize, am I just getting old? Or are we just getting old? And so now all these songs that are from like the 70s and 80s are starting to slip into that. We've never had traditional rock, but are we starting to? Are we starting to have these traditional modern classics? That's what it feels.
It could be, and when a rockabilly song gets played by Grateful Dead, then Bob Dylan, and then another band, and then another band. It goes through all these iterations. And today, in 2026, that could be considered a traditional song. I don't know.
I think Wagon Wheel is a really good example of this. Yeah, we're all tired of that fucking song. But that song that was an unfinished Bob Dylan lyric, okay? Yeah. And then Old Crow Medicine Show does it in like 2004, 2005, and it becomes like a bluegrass hit. Yeah. And then Darius Rucker, I think
it's like an anthem now.
It's like you could say that it's a Bob Dylan song.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, because he didn't finish it, and they altered it, but I don't know. You get what I mean? Like at what point does it stop being a Bob Dylan song and start being an old? You know what I mean? But here's the real question: is Darius Rucker covering Old Crow Medicine Show, or is he covering Bob Dylan?
Yeah, if you want to get into splitting hairs about that kind of stuff, I'm reading a book about the origins and the history of St. James Infirmary. That song it threads its way through all of the traditions in this country. And there's some threads that go back to the British Isles. It's pretty wild. Think about. We could be sitting back a couple hundred years ago talking about another song that is now fallen into public domain because nobody even really knows where it came from.
Right. And I mean, maybe just
So-
our record keeping is better.
Our record keeping is way better.
So it's, but the amount of time between because like traditional blues songs were considered traditional blues songs like in the 80s too. At what point were they? But back then they didn't have as good a record keeping. We know who wrote all the 70s and 80s rock classics.
Well,
But they're becoming traditional, like culturally speaking.
Yeah.
They're becoming the traditional songs.
You can look at Ma Rainey's entire discography, and you know exactly who wrote what.
Right.
Yeah, so she was really a pop singer. She would probably, when she started out, she probably would not have considered herself a blues singer. She was really a pop superstar.
But if you go back and think about the Lomax recordings or something like that, though, like he didn't even. Sometimes he was able to figure out who wrote the songs, but sometimes
or they'll say,
like,
I learned this from my uncle, and he learned it from some guy he was in jail with, or
exactly.
Yeah,
and
the folk tradition.
And where I just think like the avenues for that have changed.
Yeah,
Carrie, it's been awesome talking to you. Is there, first of all, the last question I really want to ask you is like, where do you see your role and the role of a venue like yours in times like these where people feel very scared of what's going on in the world, feel like some people feel like the end is near. And I don't mean to be dramatic, but I don't even necessarily mean like the apocalypse, but like our like current way of life seems like it's in danger.
Yeah, we're definitely we're at a critical moment right here.
I feel like you guys have always been a safe haven, though. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel about music's role in that, creating a safe haven for people?
One of the most comforting times for me is when there's an old time jam going on. I go back to the old times, okay? There's an old time jam that meets there twice a month, or a jug band jam, and there's maybe one or two people who call, or they go around in a circle and they take turns calling which tune they're going to do. That's usually the way they do it. And the act of sharing agency of what's going to happen next is a really important thing to me. And I think when people come in the room and they see that, it changes their whole perspective. It doesn't just make their day better. I think it makes life better. And that's the one thing if I had to give up everything else, I would want to keep that.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap this up? I feel like we've talked about a lot of different stuff, but right. I don't want you to.
We've gone around the world. Yeah. Wow. I appreciate. I didn't know what to expect. I appreciate you asking me to do this. Like I said, last time I did anything like this it was actually a radio. I think it was an actual live radio show. Radio, for those of you who don't remember. I do want to give a lot of appreciation to WVFS. I think that's one of the coolest things about our community, and they do play a lot of stuff that's not from here, but they play a lot of local music, and they are part of the community.
That's the only radio station I listen to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like that's it. Otherwise I'm streaming stuff. But if I'm listening to the radio, it is locked on 89.7 WVFS.
All right.
College radio is where it's at, y'all. Yeah. So if you have a local college radio station, support it. If you're in Tallahassee, make sure you support WVFS. Make sure you support the Blue Tavern. Go see some live music. I'll have a link to their calendars and everything in the description of this episode. Okay. Anything else you want to say?
All right. I feel like in the last few years, I felt a lot better about where we live. And I hear a lot of people everybody talks smack about where they live.
Yeah, the grass is always greener.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I hate this town. There's nothing to do. But I feel like it doesn't really matter. There's always something to do. I don't mean to sound like this is a platitude. There's always something to do. You just have to look for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to look a little harder. If we were in Atlanta, it would be different. But
then you run into the problem of I don't know what I want to do
because there's
I don't
too
know
many
how
choices.
far I want to go.
Yeah,
How much money do I want to spend?
But I feel like in the last few years, there's been a lot of grasping language and activity behavior about we need to put ourselves on the map. We need to we don't feel like we get any respect as a town, as a location. And I feel like, fuck that. Who cares?
My feeling about that is
let's just keep doing what we're doing and enjoy where we're at and enjoy being with each other. And it's kind of like the law of attraction. If you're trying too hard, then that pushes people away.
Yeah. I mean, I always
the developers
just say,
love it. The developers love it. They'll come in and capitalize on that dissatisfaction all day long.
And they sure have been.
And they have been.
Yeah.
They have been. So
my philosophy is if you're unsatisfied with what's going on in your town, then give them something to talk about. Do something.
Do something.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the last thing I'll say. Next Tuesday, not next Tuesday.
This probably won't be
Oh
out.
yeah, okay. That's right. That's right. Never mind.
But what I will what I will do, Carrie, I will make sure I reach out to you the week that this is actually coming out, and then in my intros, I'll talk about stuff that's going on and but there'll also be a link to your calendar in the description of this episode. So whenever you listen to this, whether it's the week it comes out or a year later, it'll take you to the current page and everything like that.
Because when you said I can tell.
But I can tell you're excited about this show. So tell us about this show that already happened.
It's not a show. It's a parade.
A parade, okay.
It's a Mardi Gras parade and,
nice.
And party out and back. And this will be our 5th consecutive one. So, hey, come next year. But on Carnival Day, on Fat Tuesday, every year we have a parade, and Joe Goldberg and the Function play outside. It's a New Orleans-style brass band, and it's big fun.
I was there, I think, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You want to talk for a minute about how that started?
Oh, it started the first year I was the owner. I said, we've got to do this. We got to make a parade because everybody was just despondent. We were just still dealing with. No, 2022. Spring
you're talking
of 22.
about after. Sorry.
So people were still
the next trauma that the country went through.
The next thing. Yeah, this is like post-quarantine, and so I was like, let's get out here and do a parade, and it was very small, but then the next year it was a little bigger and a little bigger. Now we got the Nanini Fest. People are coming with some puppets.
Oh, cool.
Some of the big head puppets.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll have a good time.
Thank you so much for being here, Carrie.
Thank you.
We'll have everything in the description. Make sure you go check out the Blue Tavern. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That was my interview with Carrie Hamby. I really enjoyed having her on the show. Go check out the Blue Tavern. You will not regret it. It's a really cool spot. And who knows, maybe someone like George Clinton will randomly show up. They've got some really cool shows coming up. Reverend Robert and John Ford are playing this Saturday night at the Blue Tavern. It's like pre-war blues. Should be really cool. Klezmer Local 42. They're a band from Athens, Georgia. They're playing on Thursday, March 19th. I actually ran into one of the guys outside of the 40 Watt a couple weeks ago. Super nice guy. Seems like a really cool band. I'm going to go check them out for sure. And then, as always, the last Tuesday of every month, you got Belmont Jones featuring Carrie that we had talked to today. So go check that out. I'll see y'all at P-Funk Fest, April 11th. See you next week on here. Take care.